Most species are being directly impacted by higher glacial melting rates in the high Arctic, using Svalbard, Norway as a case study. Because UCF lays in the subtropics and not in the high Arctic, UCF faculty does not target Arctic habitats for study. Instead, by using the experience of Dr. Richard Plate and Dr. Linda Walters, this research can become more well-rounded and better universally understood. Not only does Dr. Plate have a strong background in environmental science, but his experience with the human impacts on natural resource management, marine resource management, and environmental ethics would make him a good candidate as a mentor. Dr. Plate's research regarding complex socio-ecological systems, along with co-writing a textbook on sustainability, would strengthen the interdisciplinary lens of this proposed research. Dr. Walters focuses on the human impacts in marine environments. While her research is strongly subtropically based, she would be a great resource for knowledge on a wide range of marine ecosystems. Currently, Dr. Walters works on oyster reef restoration here in Florida, but as an expert in her field, her insight on the role humans play in marine habitats would be helpful to this research. Climate change is largely responsible for accelerating rates of glacial thinning in the high Arctic. Rapid rates of ice mass loss in conjunction with rising temperatures are creating the need for changes made by Arctic species. Literature supports the data showing that in recent years there has been changes in migration and movement patterns, reproductive success, predator-prey relationships, and diet for those Arctic species. Namely, the recorded data shows changes to polar bear routines due to ice loss. The same loss of sea ice perpetuated and accelerated by warming temperatures impacts the ecological systems on Svalbard as well. These changes include sea ice distribution, nutrient availability, weakening permafrost, and ice cover. Not only does glacial thinning affect the flora and fauna of Svalbard, but it also impacts human Arctic dwellers. We must use knowledge-based management strategies in order to compensate for tourism in the Arctic by using successful ecotourism and sustainable strategies. For the indigenous peoples of the Arctic, changes to the climate and landscape create obstacles such as less food security and loss of culturally important species such as polar bears, seals, and Arctic birds. Data shows that the Arctic is warming twice as fast compared to global averages. In the context of how accelerating glacial thinning is due to climate change and how the effects impact both wildlife and humans means that we have less time to mitigate the damage. The objectives of the study are to address how Arctic species are being directly impacted by ice loss due to climate change, as well as how humans are being directly impacted by the same ecological changes. This research seeks to explore how the loss of ice causing rising sea level, warming waters, changes in nutrient availability, and changes to food webs are compounding due to climate change. This research also is meant to explore how glacial thinning has socioeconomic impacts affecting quality of life, food security, changes to the population dynamics of culturally important species, and flooding for Arctic dwellers and indigenous peoples. All of these internal and external implications stem from climate change as the overarching influencing factor of Arctic warming. There has been quite a bit of research done previously regarding climate change and its impacts on the biology and ecology of the Arctic. In light of this, utilizing previously collected data and methods to frame this methodology of this research, which hopes to organize and synthesize previous data, seems like it would be a successful approach. Framing the ecological impacts of glacial thinning includes the collection and understanding of statistical data previously collected on sea ice extent and mass, as well as observational data covering surface air temperature, ocean salinity, ice elevation, and sea ice chart data tracking ice extent on Svalbard. In order to visually represent trend changes causing loss of ice using structure from motion photographs can help compare how ice trimlines have changed over time. This method is very valuable because it explicitly shows the loss of ice. According to Kayvon et al. 2020, dynamic and drastic ice formation changes and glacier front heights on Svalbard following the end of the Little Ice Age at the end of the 1900s supports the recent data on ice loss. According to this research, we have lost more than 90% of ice volume in this area of the Arctic within less than 100 years. The Ferdinand Glacier, which is the target of this study, has retreated 1.5 kilometers between now and then, and is not even visible from the site it was previously visible from. The biological impacts of ice loss and glacial thinning can be seen through the data collected from collaring and tracking polar bears and ringed seals in order to understand the changes in their predator-prey relationship following shrinking ice caps. This research design can also include digital reconstructions to model changes to ice sheet and glacier boundaries as supported by the structure from motion photographs. The social and ecological impacts can also be framed through the support for knowledge-based management of Svalbard and Norway's tourism, as shown through the studies Hagen et al. 2012 and Bonsuiak et al. 2021. The timetable for this research is as follows. Weeks 1 to 2, observe instances in which an Arctic bird nest is preyed upon by a polar bear. Take preliminary photographs of ice caps to be compared later on. Weeks 2 to 3, observe any glacier or ice cap breakage on Svalbard. Weeks 3 to 4, interview indigenous peoples on cultural and survival significance of the ice and the necessity for strong populations of polar bears, ringed seals, and Arctic birds. In weeks 4 to 5, interview other scientists on Svalbard and discuss their research, including any correlations or overlaps between this study and theirs, and any recorded instances of unpredictable weather events. In weeks 5 to 6, observe any instances in which an Arctic bird nest is preyed upon by a polar bear, comparing these data to weeks 1 to 2. In weeks 6 to 7, observe any glacier and ice cap breakage on Svalbard, comparing this data with weeks 2 to 3. And in the last week, week 7 to 8, take ending photographs of the glacier caps mentioned previously and compare these photographs with the preliminary photographs taken in week 1, noting any loss of ice. Every day data collection should include recording the location of the research, the sea temperature, surface air temperature, precipitation, all averaged for that day, the time of day, and what season the data collection takes place in, and any instances of flooding. In conjunction with this data collected through this timetable, the researchers should utilize previous data and previously studied data to compare and contrast to draw conclusions in order to better understand the data collected in this research. This research aims to explore how glacial thinning caused by climate change can be used as a case study to illustrate the greater implications of climate change in the Arctic. This study has a specific geographic location of the archipelago Svalbard, Norway. According to the data, glacial thinning is not only occurring, but it is occurring at an accelerating rate. The warming of the troposphere, leading to loss of ice, has impacts such as rising temperatures and rising sea levels, as well as changes to ecological dynamics across the Arctic, like average changes in temperature, ice cover, and nutrient availability, population dynamics, territory boundaries, and food webs, including changes to predator-prey relationships. These climate impacts also include biological dynamic changes and adverse effects on Svalbard wildlife, such as polar bears and Arctic birds. Svalbard is one of the largest repositories of ice outside of Greenland. An acceleration of the thinning rate of glaciers shows how the high Arctic is being changed with the magnification of warming in the troposphere. This accelerating rate, which is happening on glacial fronts, leads to disadvantageous effects such as flooding on Svalbard and rising sea levels. Data supports that this loss of sea ice also impacts marine food webs including polar bears, humans, and ice formations. Because of lower elevation of small Svalbard glaciers, they are particularly influenced by temperature changes and warming events leading to ice mass loss. This loss is being magnified by the magnification of atmospheric warming due to weakening permafrost. Permafrost warming releases stored carbon, which is a greenhouse gas, which leads to the increased warming of our atmosphere, which will continue to increase our global temperature averages. This system is a closed feedback loop and will continue to accumulate exponential effects. In order to better understand our role in climate change and the ways in which we can mitigate the damage we are doing, we must continue to fund Arctic research. This research also proposes the need for more research interdisciplinarily within the realms of climate change, sustainable development, environmental sociology, cultural anthropology, earth science, and sustainability. Here begins the alphabetical list of references used in this research proposal. Here ends the alphabetical list of cited sources. Thank you for watching and listening.